Hey everybody. All right, so this week, category is stuff that gets employers in trouble all the time. Today's topic under that category is going to be the ADA. So what is the ADA? The ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it has all kinds of things in it that apply to all kinds of different people and businesses and organizations. What we're going to talk about has to do with how it impacts employees and employers in that specific relationship. So the first thing to know about the ADA is that it doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter how you're structured. It doesn't matter. It applies to you. So I don't care if you only have 2 employees. I don't care if you're a nonprofit. I don't care about any of those things, and neither does the government. In this particular case, the ADA still applies to you no matter what. And in specific, when we talk about the ADA, we're talking about a very comfortable phrase we use in HR all the time called reasonable accommodation. So what does that mean? So reasonable accommodation basically means that you make an adjustment outside your norm that is deemed reasonable. More on that in a minute. You make an adjustment for an employee that allows them to continue to work for you. That's it, okay? Now, I'm not an attorney. You know that if you've looked at my TikTok bio, I specifically state that all the time. I am not an attorney, so anything that I say before this statement or after it or ever on this TikTok channel is not to be considered as legal advice. However, here's the thing about reasonable accommodation, is that reasonable is in the eye of the beholder and in the eye of the receiver. Okay, so reasonable can mean a lot of things. And it means different things in different companies. So the bigger you are, the more things that are probably reasonable than if you're small, for example. Okay, but when an employee comes to you for an ADA request or a reasonable accommodation request, even if they don't use those words, okay, even if they don't use those words, you still have to use the ADA accommodation process, okay? If an employee comes to you and says, hey, I got a thing, and I need to talk to you about making some adjustments to the way I do my job so that I can continue to work for you. ADA claim, right there, okay? And in an ADA situation, as the employer, you should do everything that is reasonable to make that accommodation happen, okay? The goal of an ADA is to say yes, okay? Unless it is just completely unrealistic or unreasonable to do so. So how do you know if it's reasonable or not? Well, that's where it gets a little tricky and where you may need to call an attorney, because reasonable can mean a lot of things. So here's a couple of guidelines as an HR pro that I encourage you to take a look at. But again, I'm not an attorney, so if you're not sure, pay the money for an attorney on this one and talk to an employment attorney to make sure, okay? Here's one. If you did it during the pandemic, it's reasonable. Unless it was such a financial hardship during the pandemic that to continue it in today's environment would be unreasonable. But generally speaking, if you did it during the pandemic, you can do it now. And it's going to be a hard argument that it wasn't reasonable. Okay? Second one, if somebody else in the business, even if they're not in the same job, if somebody else in the business has that exact same agreement, okay, again, you're going to have to justify if you want to say no, which you shouldn't, but if you want to say no, you're going to have to justify that there's a reason why person A can have it and person B can't. And I'll give you a hint, it's a hard win, okay? So first one, if you did it during the pandemic, you can probably do it now. If somebody else in the business has the same agreement, you can probably make it for this person. And the third one is the nature of your business, okay? And this is where it gets really tricky. So if 95% of your employees work in an office on a computer, okay, and someone comes to you and asks for, let's say, an ergonomic chair because the chairs that you have in your office are from 1980 and they don't exactly hold people in a way that really helps people's back problems, neck problems, etc., guess what? You're paying for that chair, okay? You're paying for it. Because 95% of your people are sitting in an office, and the reality is you should be, as a good human being, you should be providing them with the things to support their health while they're working for you. So an ergonomic chair, generally speaking, is going to get an approval. You're going to have a hard argument, again, not a lawyer, but you're going to have a hard argument on an ergonomic chair. Same thing with remote work. Unless you don't have the ability to work remote, but then again, what'd you do during the pandemic? But if you don't have the ability to work remote, that's one thing. But if you have a hybrid schedule today and someone comes to you for a reasonable accommodation to be remote, be ready to say yes to that. I don't care what your company policy is. ADA is different. This is a law. This is an accommodation to someone with a disability. Disability people, I gotta be honest, I've worked with a ton of them, okay? Some disabilities are visible and some of them aren't. But disability folks, aside from the diversity, inclusion, and belonging and all of those things, a lot of folks with disabilities are brilliant people. Okay, they are so good at thinking outside the box. Why? Because they have to think outside the box on a daily basis on things that you and I take for granted. They're brilliant people. You want them on your team. Okay, you want them working for you. So again, the goal is, unless it's unreasonable, the goal is to say yes. Pro tip, if you're going to decline a reasonable accommodation, okay, if someone comes to you with something that you just feel like is not reasonable and you want to decline it, have a third party take a look at it before you decline it. A lot of brokers for benefits have a team or access to a team that does that for you. It's usually not a huge fee for them to just review something you're already making a decision on. Worth the money. Or go the employment attorney route. Have somebody look at it. ADA lawsuits are expensive. I've seen a company go through it. They lost and it hurt. Okay? You do not want to get sued under ADA. Again, the goal is to try to say yes. That's what we want. So, what are your questions? I just talked about a lot of things there. ADA is a really, really big topic, and it's sticky and messy and icky. But it's important because people matter in business. So we want to take care of them, and we want to make it happen if at any and all possible. As always, comments are open for respectful discussion and questions. So drop those questions in there. What can I help you with when it comes to the ADA?